we were making good W-2, had stock, had the portfolios for the basics. We had 401ks were maxing out, but we were working more, and we were taking care of ourselves less. Our health was not great, like not getting exercise, not sleeping enough, all that basic stuff, and not seeing our kids, like not role modeling what success looks like in a truest sense.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with Spencer Hilligoss. Spencer is a passive investor who deployed 7 figures of his own capital into passive investments in the past 7 years. Like, there's a lot of sevens there. There's a lot of interesting stuff in your bio. Like I said, Spencer, I really like to let you tell that story. So first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time out today for us to talk. We're both on the West Coast, so at least we're in the same time zone, but I appreciate you taking the time out and coming to share your story. And so with that, I'd love to have you start with that, kind of tell us a bit about your background, and then we'll kind of have a conversation from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the honor is mine. Thank you, Jason, for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you about it. And it's just really the theme of the podcast in general, and your flow is like one of the many reasons I wanted to let's connect and talk about this stuff. The why has always been a key part of my life. But yeah, these days I live in the Bay Area, California. I have 2 young kids, 10 and 6, both boys. I have a business and an investing club, along with my wife, Jennifer Morimoto, who also is my co-founder and my CEO of our company, which is its own podcast, if people ever want to talk about that. I love working with my spouse, and it's a superpower in our household, but this is a lifestyle that was very, very different, like another planet from what I was living 13 years ago, right? And back in 2019, I pulled the ripcord from my 13-year career in technology companies. I was a tech, executive in financial tech companies for 13 years across 5 different companies, starting with like Intuit, stuff that is financial tech, and then earlier stage intense startups. And that was my professional journey. And 5 months before COVID is when I decided to pull the ripcord, as it were, to go in full time to manage our investing club. That was, of course, not in the cards at the time. Jennifer and I are sitting there going, okay, dual income household, making great W-2 income, growing a family, working way too much, but all that culminated in a moment that was like, okay, let's just go do this. But we never thought a pandemic was going to hit 5 months later. It
Wasn't part of the plan.
That was not part of the master plan. But the reason why we went down this path, and I went down this path, just head first, all in, was because investing played a key role in our journey, and I found it very late, relative to when I wanted to. We started in like 3 phases, very briefly. We had some capital after successful careers, climbing the ladder for years, and I was like, well, let's go buy a rental. So phase 1, went and bought a local rental. Phase 2, we realized buying a $430,000 rental in the West Coast is not exactly a great way to get cash flow. That's how you get $200 a month in cash flow, literally. And we're like, well, that was dumb. Of course, it's appreciated. It's a lot since then, but that doesn't. $200 a month doesn't change your life. And phase 2, we started buying some turnkey rentals in the Midwest. We got it to a modest portfolio, easier to manage. But I would say that buying, on average $60,000 purchase price per pop, that is mind-blowingly cheap for us West Coasters, but the cash flow is $250 a month. So better economics, but still more overhead than we wanted. It's a pain in the butt to manage rentals, even with a property manager, it turns out. Mm-hmm. And then eventually we found kind of passive investing. So we built our whole investing club after we was finding this path ourselves and stumbling our way through this stuff. And now it's just, we want to help other people walk it, and that's why it's a passion point for me. And the one other thing I got to share, Jason, you alluded to this when we were chatting offline earlier, but for the second summer in a row, like we just did this kind of experiment as a family, traveling and like living abroad, with our young kids. So we went and lived in Montenegro and Croatia, just over in the Balkans, which to be fair, I had to look up Montenegro on a map when we were planning this trip. I was like, okay, let's get clear on where that is. But we lived and worked abroad for about almost 6 weeks this summer there. And last summer we did it in Portugal. And this is truly, from my perspective and Jennifer and my perspective, like lifestyle by design, as the cool buzzwordy way of saying it. Like this is our attempt at that. And years ago, it never would have been possible. And so it's hard fought. It doesn't mean we're sitting on a beach when we're traveling. It means we've got 2 young kids in immersion school. We've got, Zoom calls occasionally I have to take at 11 or 12 midnight, because we're 9 hours ahead of our time zone. But that's the entrepreneurship and investing this way, outside the norm from what we knew for so long. This is the lifestyle that it's afforded us. And I'm just so deeply grateful to help other people with that now.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, that is kind of, I guess that's the next milestone that I would like to achieve, is not whether we live abroad or what. I want summers off with the kids. My kids are a little younger than yours. They're 5 and 3. Like our son's has that sort of standard school schedule. Our daughter still has daycare. So that's virtually all year round. But ultimately, it wasn't something that I had thought a lot about until my son started, and it was like, oh, he's got this sort of rigid schedule between like August and May, whatever it was, and then it's all of a sudden it's like last summer was the first summer we were like, well, what do we do now? Like, what do we do we do with him in like, and so it sort of struck me at that point. I'm like, I would love for us just to be able to all be off then. Like, and like you mentioned, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean I'm not going to do any work. We're not, but that's the beauty of kind of entrepreneurship and real estate investing. And especially as you grow those passive streams of income, you can live and work when and where you want, really. And that's kind of what I've seen. I love hearing your story. I've actually recently, maybe it's just because I'm on the lookout for it, but recently seen a few people, on Instagram or LinkedIn, and they're like, this summer I was off with my kids. We finally got to, this goal. And I was like, yeah, that's it. Like that's where I want to get. Like that's the next, to me, that'll be the next big thing, because there's actually a limited number of summers that they will have. Like there's a limited number of years that will actually be something that they'll be interested in. And it's like, I want to take advantage of it as soon as possible. So I love that story, and I'm very happy for you and your family. Like that's just an amazing place to be in. So sorry to kind of interrupt, but I really do.
I'm happy to hear it for your kids as well. I mean, it's some people travel earlier, like even earlier in the ages. For us, I don't see that it would have been as enjoyable if we had pushed this even earlier in our journey. So that's me just basically validating and saying, you've got the time. And I think that traveling with the, ones that are that young, on the younger end of your 2, would bring its own challenges.
Yeah, for sure. It's we our son, I mean, and it's the personality of the child as much as it is the age, because I think our son at 3, that would have been fine. We don't try to travel much with our daughter. She's a different animal. She's got a lot bigger personality. She's definitely not afraid to let you know when she's upset. And so it's something that for her it's probably a good thing that it's maybe, a couple of years away, but that's I get what you're saying there. And I think it's just a nice kind of almost like North Star to have, right? Like this is where I want to get. I want summers to be as flexible as possible, so we can, travel abroad. We can, both of us, we live in Los Angeles, but our families, like I grew up around Boston. My wife grew up around Charlotte, North Carolina. Like
awesome.
Would be cool to go spend the whole summer up in, on Cape Cod or something like that. Like be around my family and friends from growing up. Like just that stuff just would be amazing. So
Yeah, more community. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But so not to hijack your story, go on. Sorry, I just think that's such a cool milestone to have gotten to, and it also sort of proves the concept of what you did to get there. And so let's dive into that a little bit. I know you talked about sort of the phases, so let's get maybe a little bit deeper into exactly how you and your wife approached that.
Yeah, and you're not interrupting. I mean, this is a conversation, right? I think thinking back to, okay, deep into that career, and I was, some people consider 40 hours a week a long week. Like at the time, and this isn't like a humble brag thing about how hard I was working, because everyone works their butt off in their careers, right? But I was doing 80 hours a week in office at the most hardcore startup I'd been at, years into it, like 10 years into it. When I had this moment, I was like, I hadn't seen our younger kid in like 2 weeks or something at that time, like a really painful amount of time. And because I was going in so early and I was coming home so late, like just, going in and out of the city over to San Francisco. I was working in downtown, and that was just so broken feeling and extraordinarily challenging in our household on so many levels. I mean, relationship wise, not being present for kids. So that was a catalyst moment. And it started with this. And this is the step, when folks have asked me, like, how did you start? Everyone, and myself included, we want to skip this step. And this is the unskippable step for every person out there. It's going to look a little different, but it's this. Jennifer and I hired a sitter for the whole weekend, and we needed the kids out of the house, and we sat down and we said, we need to pause. Like, we need to pause and evaluate and figure out, like, what we're doing now feels really great financially. In the Bay Area, you still have, in all of California, LA, San Diego, all the rest, like, these are not cheap markets. Same can be said for New York and a bunch of other East Coast markets too. The pricey markets, dual income households are kind of necessary for majority of people. Mm-hmm. And we were making good W-2, had stock, had the portfolios for the basics. We had 401ks were maxing out, but we were working more, and we were taking care of ourselves less. Our health was not great, like not getting exercise, not sleeping enough, all that basic stuff, and not seeing our kids, like not role modeling what success looks like in a truest sense.
Yeah.
And when we cleared the calendar and got the kids out of the house, hired that sitter, we literally sat down and said, okay, we're going to use this weekend to establish a future state we want to get to. Like, what's our ideal day? And I can't take any credit for this exercise. There's brilliant people out there who said, do a vision board. And I used to roll my eyes at that stuff. Right. And my hope would be other people out there can just kind of get over themselves a little bit, because I needed to hear a tougher message on that years ago. Like, it's worth sitting down and taking an exercise seriously to say, how do I want my ideal day to look? What will you start your day with? And I was like, I don't want it to start with just doing emails. It's at 4 a.m. I'll tell you that much. It should start with family and health, and hopefully some friend time at some point, etc. So we did that exercise, and then we got down to brass tacks and said, how much income do we want to have passively coming into our household on a monthly basis, dollar amount, and in what year, time scale? So we just time bound it, and folks who come from corporate world, W-2 world, if they've done any form of goal setting, you heard SMART goals, or something like that. And we walked out of that weekend after there was arguments with tears, there was reconciliation, there was laughter, there was it was hardcore, man. And that is not something I think a lot of couples are excited, or any couples are excited to willingly sign themselves up for, because if you're having those discussions with that candor, then that's a good sign. That means you're getting to it. If they're topical and you're like, cool, that was fun, you probably didn't get down to brass tacks, man. Like you probably didn't really have that exercise done correctly, because when we walked out, we said, how about this? In 15 years, we want to hit that dollar amount passively per month. And then we came back the next weekend and we're like, okay, that's way too long. and we cut it in half. We cut it down to, I think, 7 years, and we ended up hitting that in 5. So I didn't want to just preach at people about the importance of the goal setting exercise, because in essence, that's just what it is. But what it feels like it's helpful to feel and understand how challenging it is to do that exercise correctly if you're with someone who you're spending the rest of your life with, or you're married. Now, if you're single, that's going to be very different.
Right.
So for goal setting, that was the first step. While working full time, the second thing was, I need time. I thought I had no time, and I audited my calendar. I found 10 hours a week I could put towards something else. And I was fortunate around that time, a mentor of mine I'd known already for years in the W2 world. He guided me through taking big promotions, getting to the point at 26 years old, many years ago now. I'm 41 now. At 26, I was leading teams of 200 people, way in over my skis. But he is the mentor that helped me through those moments that were really challenging. The same mentor guided me into a company to take on a role that happened to be at like a real estate lender and tech company, like a platform lender. And I didn't know what the heck a lot of that terminology meant. I did, like, full disclosure, I grew up in a real estate household. My dad was a broker for 30 years, and I had to work for him doing open houses when I was a teenager, when I, cleaning out fridges for properties, doing stuff I didn't want to do, which is kind of why I got scared into tech. But like, that doesn't teach you anything about investing. Brokerage is a tiny sliver of real estate. And so I didn't get it until I got into this company. It was the last tech company I was at, same one I eventually quit in 2019 to go do, to take on the mantle of full-time leading Madison investing here. But at that company, I was like, wow, look at all these zeros behind these transactions, all the amazing financial outcomes, these investors that we were lending money to from this company. Like, we were lending on fix and flips, and I can't swing a hammer. So I'm like, I don't want to do fix and flips. I can't, I'm not the handy guy. I don't fix stuff around our house. Like, I use YouTube, and Jennifer's better with a hammer than I am. So like, I wanted to find a way to participate. I didn't really know how to start. We had set those goals. We knew what we wanted to do to supplement our income and eventually replace it. But so eventually I was like, let's look at bigger properties. We went through, we bought some rentals. We stumbled our way through those phases. We bought the local one, spent too much money. We bought a series of properties to get up to 5 in the Midwest. And those all felt like they weren't quite the right fit. Eventually we put our first 25,000 into as LPs, as limited partners, in a syndication deal and a multifamily deal out in Alabama. And that was very successful, and once that happened, it was like, okay, this is different. And we were still working. I had to go do 2 hours of work on my future investing, passion, before going into leading teams of people at my day job, the job before the job style. But that was now clear to me, like, okay, that's the direction we want to keep investing. So we did put more money into those types of deals, multifamily deals, eventually self-storage. And then it was just abundantly clear, because coworkers and folks in our network were like, oh, you're having a lot of success with your capital on these things. Do you want to just let us know which ones you're going to invest into? And, we don't want to fly out to Texas. We don't want to fly out to Georgia. We don't want to fly out to Colorado, do due diligence, walk around properties, see how the block looks, look at what they think are boring reports on financials for buildings, underwriting, all that stuff. And I was like, okay, if this is something that other people are clearly wanting, and there's a lot of that interest, then let's go put a club together around this. And that was the genesis of it. It really was very organic, and there was no master plan to scale it to eventually fully become what it is now. But that was the whiz bang version of that. And I just have to mention, the last thing on this diatribe too, Jason, is like, when I was growing up and watching like my dad's business grow, he was a broker, and it was the only income stream that we had in our household. It was a good income stream. I mean, he was one of the most successful brokers at his firm in the 90s, like really high flying. And so our life was comfortable, as a teenager and stuff, and a little older than that. But we got hit with a really tough decade, like we call it, like a dark decade, in our family. And without being too grim, it's like lost a younger brother to cancer during that time, lost like 3 grandparents, I think, within a scope of like a year. There's a lot of loss, a lot of hardship, and back to back to back, and it kept going. And then I watched what happens when a business and one income shrink, right? And our lifestyle got smaller. I'm not going to act like we were like poverty stricken, because that's not the case either. But it was a material impact, and being there to watch that go down, it just left an impression on me about what it means to have one option, one option for income, one option for how do you take care of the people that are relying on you. And clearly the one income stream option is not going to be sufficient. So like that somewhere in my brain and my heart stuck with me for a very long time. And it really manifested in this investing journey, an entrepreneurship journey for me, where I was like, okay, now we're doing it. Now we're insulating ourselves and our family as best we can to be able to weather whatever life's going to throw at you, because it inevitably always will. And that's just wanted to kind of mention that as well, because it was not, I don't think any of this would have happened if I hadn't seen that hardship and experienced that hardship by watching my family go through that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry you went through that dark decade. I mean, it's an odd thing. It seems almost like things like that seem to group together. Like it's like you'll get a bunch of sort of bad experiences kind of come all at once. I don't know what, or maybe just that's, you notice, I don't know what that phenomenon is, but it does sometimes feel that way. There's a couple things that you mentioned, Spencer, that I really want to highlight, because I think they're super important for people listening, and I've kind of had some similar experiences alongside that. One, you talked about sort of that weekend of goal setting with your wife, and I think a couple things. I mean, whether you're single or in a relationship, whatever, the goal setting piece, figuring out what your life is going to look like in some specific time frame, and then because then it just becomes math, right? Like it's just it becomes a very simple math problem of, like, I know you said 15 years was in a good market, so you got there faster, but like ultimately that's the idea, is like, what do I want my life to look like in X number of years? What if you had said 5 years? That means you have to invest more in the beginning. Like there's just, it's kind of, you can use the math to figure out literally exactly what you need to do. Now, you do have to have those conversations about, in the hard stuff, like you said, where it's emotional. I mean, my wife doesn't really, she listens to me when I talk about real estate, but she's not involved in the real estate business that much. And I realized that I was getting so busy, because at the time when I sort of got into it, I had a W-2 job. We had our own business in surgery, and then I was, developing the real estate business. And so I realized pretty quickly I had to schedule everything. Like it was like, this is when I go to the gym. This is like my playtime with the kids. This is when I'll be here. So, we have date night. Like these, like it became, because as you mentioned, you found 10 hours. They're there. Like for most people, those hours are there. You just have to kind of do a true audit of how you spend your time. So I kind of did all that stuff, but I did it independently. I like, okay, this is what I have to do to get all this stuff into my day. And then I realized, oh, wait, sometimes she wants me to do things, or things come up where it's, I'm like, well, I already have this. And then she's upset. And, you run into those hurdles as a couple. And so I first suggested, I was like, I think we need to like schedule our life. Like, and it sounds terrible. Like, I understand, like, I didn't even like saying it. She hated the thought of that, but ultimately that's where we've gotten to, even with her initial kind of pushback and hesitation. So I understand when people don't want to do that. And I too, like, if you had asked me that's what I needed to, if you told me that's what my life was going to be like 10 years ago, I would have scoffed at that. Like, who does that? Who plans your life? Like, who does that? Is it successful people that are building for something in the future where maybe life doesn't have to be so rigid? Because if you don't do it now, then you will do it to some extent forever. Like if you won't have a way to make it optional. And so if you can be, call it aggressive about it in the beginning, then you can really set yourself up for then that freedom that you mentioned, where you go, and spend the summer abroad. So I just thought that was a really important piece to highlight, that people aren't going to like it. But it is so important to sort of paint that picture of what you want, life to look like in the future.
Can I share something else on that topic? Because you really got me thinking on, and it's just such a great series of nuggets that you shared right there. So thank you for sharing them, Jason. It's like, first and foremost, there's a theme of sacrifice, right? And the theme of sacrifice is one that no one enjoys. I didn't enjoy like to make those 10 hours per week, and your number would have been different in the early days, right? Um, I didn't enjoy waking up at 4 a.m. I don't wake up spring in my step. I chug coffee, man. I've never been that guy. I have never been that guy. I was, even before business, not to go TMI on a tangent, I'll just say, I grew up very not business oriented. I played in metal bands and punk bands, and I thought business was stupid. Somehow I found mentors that slapped it into me figuratively that like that leadership was a good track for me. I never cared about being a manager, cared about being a leader. I don't care about power seeking stuff. It's just not me. Mm-hmm. But going down that path taught me a lot. And I think that one of the many lessons is like, okay, within discipline, you find freedom. And that might be totally butchering a quote from like maybe Jocko Willink, famous Marine, is an author as well. I really subscribed to that. And so along that corporate journey and with mentorship, I'm grateful for my W-2 career. A lot of folks in the investing community, real estate investing community, like to trash the W-2 world, but it taught me so many skills that I use now every day, such as my calendar is blocked, like fully. There's some hours I keep open because our investors, I want to be a resource for them. But yeah, my calendar literally says now, it says like, wake up, help kids get ready for school, work time start. And specifically, this is the work I'll be doing at this start time. And that would have scared the crap out of me if I had shown myself at like 21 that lifestyle. I would have said like, I don't want that, but to your point earlier, another platitude, which actually resonates with me now and always will, is like, easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life. And hard choices to me mean sacrifices, and sacrifices actually, when you just bullet them out, they're not that hard to give up for the right reason. It's not hard to give up playing Xbox. It's not hard to give up. I'm a big guitarist still. It's a hobby, but I didn't touch my guitar for like a 2-year period during the earliest days of our investing building stage, And so I don't want to use the rest of our time here just talking about this, but sacrifice is not what people see on Instagram. It's not what people see on Facebook. It's not what people see on LinkedIn. They'll see us say, hey, look, we're traveling. But it's like, yeah, what you don't see is that my calendar is fully blocked. And if I don't do that, I don't feel like I'm able to find the freedom and spend being present with my family because I'm not sure if I'm actually executing on the key priorities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we've said it, like, that is not how I thought I would feel about it. But what I've realized is kind of once you shift into that mode of discipline, scheduling, and all of that, and you find some of those hours back, and every here and there, I'm like, you know what, I just, today is a day I don't feel like sticking to the schedule or something like that, and then I don't like it. It feels wrong. I don't because, like you said, like, you can never feel present in anything because you're like, I'm probably missing something because I didn't stick to, kind of my routine, my schedule. And it's just like, so then you're like, you're supposed to be spending time with the family, but you're thinking about other things. I mean, it really does create a freedom in the way you feel, the way that you can act. And again, that's in the day, but then you scale that out. Now you've found a way to be off with your kids in the summer because you have sort of maximized the time and structured it in a way that really works for you. So I think it's actually shockingly freeing how much of an impact that, kind of changing my thinking on that stuff has had. It's really kind of unbelievable. If I think back to not that long ago, how I would have been really pretty resistant to all of this. You also kind of, you mentioned that sort of, like I said, the math behind, setting these goals and things like that. And you got there faster than you thought you would, which is amazing. What did you, and this probably, sort of plays into the whole know your why. I always ask every guest that, sort of, when you get to that point and you're like, oh, hey, I did this, I achieved that goal. And I do think that oftentimes if people set a long-term goal like that, like you said 15 years, they get there much faster.
Yes.
I don't know who says this quote, but it's that saying about you'll underestimate what you can accomplish in a year, but overestimate what you accomplish in a year, but dramatically underestimate what you can accomplish in 5, or something like, it's like something to that effect, where like we always think, oh, it's like, hey, it's a simple example. It's like, hey, can you get, these pictures hung on the wall? And it's like, it takes probably 30 minutes to actually do it, but then, you don't do it for a long time. And
For a few months.
It's just, yeah, it's just like, the idea is you can, if you set something up like that in place, and then you have that goal, you will work towards it. It probably in a faster pace than you thought. But when you got to that point and you were like, okay, well, we did it, kind of, what did you do at that point? Did you have another meeting? Did you reassess those goals? What steps did you take there?
Oh man. Well, you kind of, hit on a theme a moment ago, which ties directly into the way I want to answer your question on this, which is, setting like a 15-year goal, just from starting with our example from our situation. The reason I also wanted to set something so far out is because the quickest way to remove any feeling of agency or control to execute on a goal we set is to make it way too urgent. Because then the excuse flag can fly. So like immediately, right? It's like, okay, we're going to get there in 2 years. Be like, no, you're not, man. Like, and if you are, you're going to have to like completely go high risk on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So remove the excuse and then proceed with planning on more digestible bites. And that was really kind of ties into answering your question here, Jason, is like, by the time that we hit that, so much had happened. Like so much had changed. And I mean that positively in life, that it was almost like a non-event. We had to like literally stop and say, oh, I guess we did just hit it. But that's not to say we weren't working our freaking butts off. It's because as soon as that 15-year goal, came back next week and chopped it down to 7. I went in back at that planning period and said, okay, now to break it down. Let's break it down by year. No, let's break it down even further. By quarter, let's break it down even further. By month, you guys get the drill. It's down by week. And I would literally get a piece of paper. This sounds so low tech for a guy that, I like all the software and platforms that I use now and apps, but this is still very effective for me. The sole focus of like getting a hard copy piece of paper and a Sharpie and writing like, this is what has to happen today. And I tape it to my wall, and just, have a whiteboard now, really fancy, but that's literally what I was doing in the earliest days, was saying, this week, paper. Okay. What happened today? Paper. And it's so low tech, but it's a commitment made to oneself. And like, that is why by the time that we got to that stage of hitting our goals, I'd been doing that now for years, and it just stacks. The commitments made to oneself would just stack on top of each other. Other things happen for momentum in the meantime, of course. So full disclosure, like when we started that journey, I mean, we were fortunate to have bought a house in the Bay Area in 2013 in a market that wasn't hot, that then became hot. So that was a helpful additional capital source. We did like a few refis and a HELOC and all this stuff along the way before rates turned into what they are now. That dual income household, and also resources capital wise. I'm just speaking to capital sources because that helped a lot, right? But that's also not just luck. We were taking action along the way, and so for people that hear that, I don't want them to sit there and say like, right, so you did these goals and you did this investing, be like, yeah, but throughout the process, we would stop and evaluate like, okay, is this decision the right one? Let's talk about it and let's map this out and math this out. Like, let's do the math. And along the way, we would check in and are we on track? So I just think that as we got to that goal and we hit our passive income goal, we'd also decided to like move to a new place. We decided to, like we still drive the same cars, but we decided to get a house that actually could fit us because it was a really tiny house, and then what happens? You reevaluate. You're like, well, maybe our passive income goal is too low for that lifestyle. Now we need to raise it again. and so you reevaluate. So anyways, I just wanted to share that context for people that like,
Oh.
it was a non-event because that work was habitually occurring every single day.
Yeah. I think that's usually how it happens, right? If you truly set a goal and commit to it, you're just going to kind of show up there and not like it's just going to happen. And probably before you really, your time frame was set for. And it's funny because it's like, a lot of people, the last couple of years have been hard when interest rates went up for a lot of real estate investors, but like,
Yep.
ultimately that's how markets work, right? So there was a lot of upward momentum for a number of years, and then we hit a hard patch and things slow down, and it's just going to do that forever, right? It's just going to keep going up and then have a drop and then keep going up. And I was like literally this week driving with my wife, and we're talking about it, and it was like, it's been hard the last couple years, and it, like financially, and like you mentioned, we are fine. Like there are people far worse off, and I think we're very fortunate, but it's with the work that we've put in to do that, right? It's like there was
Right.
It wasn't an accident that we were kind of okay to weather this storm. And the other thing that's not an accident is like, okay, we weather the storm, now things come back up in a couple of years, like the plan's right back on track, right? It hasn't gone away.
That's
just
right.
because there was a little hitch. And I think the really important piece of that is like recognizing the time frames. And again, it's
Oh, absolutely, man.
you're gonna, like, saying 15 years or 7 years or whatever it is, like, don't you can't set a goal that's like, in 6 months I'm going to be financially free, like, and because if that's achievable, you were already financially free. You just decided to take some big risks, and like you mentioned, and maybe you hit, but like ultimately it does take a long time, but probably not as long as you think. And I just think that's kind of the message that I want to put out there. And I think the same thing for you. And though it's been tough, and there have been times I've considered going back to a W-2 job, I haven't, and I have been able to be there for my kids and my wife. Like, I haven't had to be in those 80-hour work weeks that I don't have control over. Like, it's, yeah, I get up early. Sometimes I'm staying up late, but I can do it my way. And ultimately it's going to pay off in the end, despite the fact that it has been harder over the last couple of years. But it's, again, I think you just have to be willing to put that plan in place and stick with it up and down.
And I really appreciate you sharing the topic, and I think that headwinds and tailwinds, the winds will blow both directions, right? And I think that as humans, not to get too heady and philosophical here, this is like the leadership hat coming back on, I guess. We're very emotional creatures, myself very much included in that bunch. And we suck at conceptualizing time, to your point, exactly your point. Time scales and just understanding them. It's easier for folks who are older and wiser and have more gray hairs than me, but to a point. Like in our younger years, older years, like it's a challenge to conceptualize who will we be as people, what will we find interesting, who will we want to spend our time with, all of these questions. What will our physical condition and health and mental health be 7 years from now, right, 10 years from now? And so, again, I don't want to get too preachy, but I really appreciate what you shared there about timescales and just the fact that, there's going to be times that are quote unquote easier, and there's going to be times when there's going to be more tailwinds. More headwinds, more challenge. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so key to just break it down into digestible bites and lean in heavily on what's controllable, because and know the line. Like, just mentors always reminding me, like, identify and just crystallize, like, what are your controllables and what are your uncontrollables, and as simple as that. wasting brain space and emotional energy on worry is completely counterproductive. Of course, I still do it like everybody else. I'm a human, but you and
It's
I both
easier
do.
said than done. Yeah, don't do
Right.
that. Well, I do, but yeah, try not to do it. Yeah.
Everyone does, and but that's why you get routines in place around things that are proven to actually help mitigate. Get a fitness routine that rocks for you, right? Like have build great relationships with your significant other and your friends and your community and your kids. All those things. So, anyways, I'm not a personal coach or anything, but I really appreciate the time scale comment.
Yeah. No, I think we're very much kind of on the same page on our approach to this. So, Spencer, we could talk about this all day, literally, but I know we both have calendars to follow. So I do want to kind of shift here and make sure I do get to ask you the questions I ask every guest. And I alluded to it before, but specifically, what is your why? You've kind of gotten to be in a space where financially you have reached the goals that you and your wife set. I'm sure that everybody kind of, once you do, you change the goalpost. But what's your why at this point? What's kind of driving you forward and motivating you?
I think very simple for me. I want to show up as the best dad and spouse that I can. That's the first order why. I think along the way, a bigger picture why for me is to, without going into a therapy session that people don't want to hear about, I'll just say to stop generational trauma dead in its tracks. My family picture is not exactly stable I don't mean in our household, I mean in my parents and all that. So that would be another goal for me. And it's as simple as that, when I look at manifestations as to how are we doing on this whole track of trying to deliver on their why goals in this lifestyle by design, as it's called these days, like traveling and stuff, that's all in service of effectively trying to immerse our kids and our family and ourselves into a broader view of what it means to be a good person and human in the world, and of course, along the way, call it a tertiary or a fourth, fifth goal. Also want to be able to enable other people to achieve success in the ways that I know how to add value back to them. And if you can find an intersection between something that's for profit and does some kind of positive impact in the world, that's ideal. One thing I have to mention, because it's a big theme in our household, is financial literacy. And Jennifer, for example, sits on the board of a Bay Area nonprofit that's focused on financial literacy for youth. Like that is something that means a lot to us. And so enabling our kids to have some of those tools that we were not necessarily given. I know it's a big topic in general these days for a lot of folks, because none of us feel like we got financial education in academia that is actually useful in the real world. But I think those would be it. It'd be those topics.
Yeah. No, I think financial literacy, educating people, providing, whether it's, through content creation, through the podcast, or just like sitting down and talking to them, I think it's just such a important mission especially for folks like us that didn't necessarily grow up with that knowledge. I think unless you were sort of on that track in school, probably didn't get a lot of financial literacy teaching. And I think it is so important to me as well to kind of pass that on to my kids. But like, there's plenty of adults that don't have that knowledge, and so it's like, yeah, let's talk to the youth. But continuing to kind of just spread that message and having conversations, it's just such a powerful piece. And I know that you're doing that as well. Well, with that in mind, when people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way? How should they get in touch?
Yeah, they can find me at madisoninvesting.com. That's our investing club website. They can book a call if they want to just share notes on nerd out on investing or any of the wise stuff we just talked about here.
Yeah. Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes so people can find you. Spencer, I just want to say Thank you. This has been, I've really enjoyed this conversation. A lot of topics that are, I am particularly passionate about. And I think that I just really resonate with, kind of your mission and what you're doing, and have a lot of, sort of shared whys, I guess, if you will. So thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing everything that you did. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, well, the feelings are very much mutual. So thank you so much for having me on, Jason. And these topics are clearly very fun for me to get into. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you guiding me to it. And it's just been an honor.
Awesome. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Please make sure you connect with Spencer, and please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. And as always, thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?